Hi, I'm Renarta Clanton Moyd. I'm the Communications Specialist with the Cumberland County Schools and your host of Get Connected. During this monthly show, we highlight numerous educational topics that face today's student, educator, and parent in the Cumberland County Schools. Now, last year, more than 800 students were tardy to our elementary schools every day. This year, the Cumberland County School System is looking to team up with the parents of students to combat tardiness from grades kindergarten through 12th. Now, we're finding that many students are being checked into school 1 hour late every day and being checked out by their parent or guardian early each day as well. Now, after this break, we'll talk with educators about what's being done to combat tardiness this school year on this edition of Get Connected.
People think I'm trash, but they're wrong. Today I'm just an aluminum can, but one day I could be a stadium.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Get Connected. We're talking with Cumberland County Schools Director of Schools, Mark Culbreth, and Principal Ann McFadyen from Brentwood Elementary School. Now, we're discussing what's being done to curb student tardiness in our schools this year. Mark, and welcome.
Thank you for having us.
You know what, this is the first time you all have been here on the show, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, this is gonna be good. This is good. Well, now, you know what? Both of you, even though you're one of our directors of school support, you've been a principal.
Yes, ma'am.
For how many years do you remember?
Over 11 years before I took this position.
Okay. And you are a principal and have been for some time.
11 years as a principal, and this will be my 5th year at Brentwood Elementary.
Wow. So then when people start talking about tardiness, you truly understand the essence of what it means to be tardy.
Absolutely.
How so?
Well, I would tell you in high schools, it's a very big concern. And with the high school child, it's all about getting them to school because it's really more about the child than it is the parent at that age, typically. With elementary, it's a little different because they're so dependent upon their parents to get them to school.
Okay. And it's so good that we're looking through our campaign this year and teaming up with the parent to try to get the kids to school, our young people to school on time. Now, let me ask you all this. Why did the Cumberland County Schools see, what kind of brought us to this point where we saw this particular, us taking this step to rectify this problem?
Well, Dr. Till met with a group of elementary principals in the spring and talked to them about those issues that were challenging them in student achievement. Mm-hmm. One of those was tardiness, another was transiency. And so we formed a task force of elementary principals and really brainstormed about what we could do to make a difference. We brought in our Student Support Services Division as well in the Cumberland County Schools with Dr. Black and her team, and we just really sat around and thought about how to best solve this problem. We then took it to the Principals Council, which is a group of principals that advise the county about issues, mm-hmm. and then took it back again. Ultimately, we actually asked the opinion of all of our principals and took surveyed them and got information from them because we really wanted to cover every possibility and trying to find ways to address this issue.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that in mind, and you all have had there at Brentwood some tardiness issues, correct?
We have.
Okay.
Just children coming in late, and it just really impacts their education when typically literacy and math instruction are taught first thing in the morning, right as soon as that bell rings. As you said, every minute counts. So we start our instruction as soon as that tardy bell rings. And as I said, that's typically math and literacy instruction. And if they are 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late, an hour late, they have missed a lot of valuable instruction. And when they miss that instruction, there is nothing to replace that time. There's no getting that time back. Mm-hmm. And if they do that several times a week, especially, again, if it's literacy instruction, they're missing 3-4 times a week by being 30 minutes late. That's 2 hours out of the week that they have missed instruction. And not only does it hurt that child, but every disruption that takes place during instruction hurts the education of all the other students in the classroom.
Exactly.
So all of those disruptions stop the teacher, stop the other students from learning, and it just makes a huge impact on the child and all of the children in the classroom. So again, every minute is so important, and we don't have enough minutes in the day, and we cannot afford to lose any of our minutes.
Any of our time. And you know what, something that comes to my mind as well, before when we were working on this particular campaign, Mark, I'm glad you sat me down and you briefed me on exactly what the task force was doing and the findings and those types of things. And something that really shocked me, which I didn't realize that there were so many parents who were coming and checking their students out, or guardians checking their students out at the end of the day, especially at our elementary schools. What's that about?
They do not want to wait in the car rider line,
Okay.
and so they know that typically the elementary school asks for parents to check out students before a certain time, because the end of the day is very important as well. Teachers are concluding the day, wrapping up the learning, and getting it concrete for the children so that they are pulling everything in, getting homework written down, packing book bags. There's just a lot that takes place at the end of the day. So we ask if parents are checking out to do so probably about 30 minutes before the actual dismissal bell rings. And so parents don't want to wait in that line to pick up their children, so they come in and check them out. So then again, they're missing remediation time, they're missing science instruction. Again, very valuable instruction time that is being missed by leaving school early.
Now, something that you mentioned earlier, Ann, and you said every minute counts. Every minute counts. We're really trying to hammer that home with our young people, with our teachers, everyone in the classroom, with parents. Every minute counts from start to finish. Class time matters. The rest, don't miss out on your future. Talk to me about that, Mark.
Well,
That motto.
yes, ma'am. When we looked at it, I shared some data with you. When we looked at how many kids were absent, and you look in the elementary schools, it's about 4% a day. When you put that in actual numbers, that's over 800 children a day that are tardy to school. So we do realize, like Ann said, that it's so important that the research says that the early morning hours are a child's best learning time. So when they're coming in an hour late, that's not just an hour of instruction, that's their best hour of instruction. And so that's something we've talked about. One issue we looked at is how that when we deal with them through the court system in those rare cases where it becomes truly chronic, that the court system only looks at absenteeism and not tardies. But you can be, I had one child I learned had missed 77 times, had been tardy to school. Where you add up 77 hours, that's a lot of days.
That's a lot of days.
And so we're trying to respond to it and look at it that way, as every minute really does matter.
And I know that there at your school and at Brentwood Elementary, I understand you have a really successful incentive program that's really helping.
We did. We started last year. It was just the tardies just continued to seem like they were growing and growing, and our leadership team sat down and we had to brainstorm some ideas of something to do differently, because what we had done in the past just wasn't making an impact. So we wanted to come up with an incentive program, and we started the Brentwood Bowl, and it was all related to football, and we had a great big bulletin board that had the football field on it, and the children were able to score touchdowns because based on their yards that they moved by being to school every day and by being on time each day. So then as a class, we had other factors that we were focusing on as well, but the biggest piece was that tardy piece and really impacting those children and motivating them, because what we were doing wasn't working. So we had to find something else to do to really motivate the children. When you motivate the children, they go home talking about it, they get excited about it, and so they start talking to their parents about how important it is to be at school, and immediately we saw a decline in the number of people coming through the office checking in. Our check-in stack of cards decreased from a big stack to a much smaller stack. But it just, when the children are talking about it, they get excited about it. And any opportunity that we had that the parents were in for awards programs, PTA meetings, we were talking about our Brentwood Bowl and showing them, directing them to the bulletin board. And we had all of our teachers were football players with their heads on little football player bodies.
Oh, really? How did that look?
Cute. It really was.
And my assistant principal and I and our intern were cheerleaders on the field.
Did you have to put on like a little costume?
It was one of the little pre-made ones, and they just cut out our head and put
Okay.
it right on the...
You weren't going for the short skirt stuff.
So, and we have a news show that we do every morning on the news, and so we promoted it there, and we recognized the classes as they were making touchdowns, and we had a wheel to spin for prizes that the class could achieve. And so the children were very excited about it, and when we had parents coming to us talking about it, we knew that it was making it home and that the children were truly excited about it and making that difference, and that they wanted to be there because they wanted to support their classroom and they wanted to make sure that they were helping their classroom earn those yards to eventually make a touchdown. And we celebrated those touchdowns, and that was so important.
So it's made a true difference there.
It has.
That's good in the culture of your school.
It has. It increased staff morale, it increased student morale. It just made a very positive difference, especially right there at the end of the school year when it's a tough time with knowing that we have testing coming up and there's a lot to do, a lot to cover, a lot to learn, and we need to make sure we had everybody there every single day.
That's good. Are you hearing that some of our other schools are picking up incentive programs as well?
I do believe that they are, and you know, that was a big part of what came out of our conversation in the task force. This was not about gotcha. We wanted to find positive ways to incentivize our families to come in. And I worked with 29 of our schools, and I looked at the data for all of our elementary schools, and I could see where it was making a difference at Brentwood. So I do see it at other schools, and it's now going to be part of our county regulation 4400 that all schools will have to come up with an incentive program, and I think that's going to make the biggest difference. Because I have a school-age child like Ann does, and I know my child would get on us to be there, and I think that'll work for them too.
Exactly, and you know, as a parent, I know I have as well school-age children. You really kind of hate to be there, get them there late, because really, I know for us, I know that I am forming their minds and their thoughts as far as how they will act when they get out in the real world. And when you're tardy to work too many times, of course, we all know the boss says goodbye. You know, we'll find someone that can be there on time, ready to work. So, you know, I think that it really helps us to try to establish this on-time piece right now. Every minute counts right now, so that when they do become adults and get out into the real world, they'll know how to be on time.
And we talk to our children about this is their job. Your parents have a job, this is your job, and you have to be here on time and you have to do what is expected of you at your job. So we have that conversation with our children, how important it is to be here each and every day on time and really following through with that.
And when I was at a high school, we shared a social worker with an elementary school. And she wanted so much to see us do more at the elementary level to address attendance, because what I find in high school, when you look at a transcript, it'll give you that child's attendance throughout their school career, and these attendance issues that we see in high school start back in elementary school. So we know we've got to form good habits there, or we'll be in a bad place when we get into high school.
Forming good habits, that's so important. And then you know what, I think some of your research, you found that tardiness leads to suspension.
Absolutely.
It feeds into that as
There have
well.
been a bunch of studies about it. I just read something about middle school and what we can figure out in middle school that will affect their possible graduation, and absenteeism and tardiness was the #1 indicator. So getting them to school, we can't teach them if they're not there. So it is tremendous, and I think we start first with elementary to make a difference and then work our way through.
That's good.
And I think part of that is also that the routine of the day is established first thing in the morning, and when children come in the door late, they're feeling like they have to play catch up. Their procedures didn't get taken care of in the morning, their homework didn't get put in the right basket, whatever the classroom procedures are did not take place, and so then they're late behind on work, and that's frustrating when you're a child and having to play catch up, and you have to try to get done everything that should have already been done an hour ago of everything that you missed. And so it doesn't start them off, the students, on the right foot either, and having to step in and be late and trying to catch up and figure out what's going on in the classroom and why is this taking place and which group am I supposed to be in. So being there is just so important to get the day started right and get them rolling on the right path for the day so they can be successful all day long.
That's great. Well, you know what we're going to do is take a break. And I think you're leaving us, aren't you?
I am.
Okay. I hate that. I wish you could stick around for a little longer, but we'll figure out some reason to get you back here. Okay?
All right.
All right. Well, don't you go anywhere. Stick around for more Get Connected.
Hey, parents out there. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. The ones with the kids. Wait, about kids? Need your help. Come on. Aside from giving us food, clothes, and somewhere to live. Yeah. We need you to get us to school. was there first in the reading circle? Me, 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 me. Or simply settling down so we can learn. I agree with that concept wholeheartedly. And the same goes for the end of the day. Please don't check us out early. We miss valuable class time that way. Like the other day, Miss Jones told us the funniest story about Larry the Llama goes to Math Town. But then I got checked out early. Whee! So remember, parents, yes, you, I'm talking to you, the ones with the kids. Every minute counts from start to finish. Class time matters. We don't want to miss out on our future.
Thanks for joining us for this edition of Get Connected. We're talking with Cumberland County Schools Director of Schools, Mark Culbreth, and Principal Dan Krumanocker from Douglas Byrd High School. Now, we're discussing what's being done to curb student tardiness in our schools this year. I was going to say, Mark, welcome, but I've already welcomed you.
Yes, ma'am.
Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, you
Glad
know,
to be here.
This is your first time on the show as well.
Yes, ma'am. It's my first time.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're here with us.
I'm glad to be here.
All right. All right. Now, you've been a principal for how long?
This is my 16th year as a principal.
Wow.
I've been at Douglas Byrd High School for 6.
Okay. Okay. And you've worked in middle schools as well.
I've worked in elementary, middle, and high school.
Okay. Well, then totally you get this whole tardiness thing.
Absolutely.
And
From
what
all
do you
three
make
levels.
Of it? Okay. And what do you make of it?
It's a problem for us. It's definitely something that we need to address. It's very important that do we make every minute count? And when students come to school tardy, it causes a disruption to the classroom. So we need to definitely do something to address it, to decrease the number of tardies that we have on a daily basis.
Now, with you being there in high school, Dan, Mark and I talked prior to the break about, you know, we talked about suspensions and dropout and that type thing. Right. I know you've done some research and looked at some stats and whatnot. Come back and talk with us a little bit more about that, Mark.
Well, what we find and what the research finds and what common sense will tell you is that if these habits start early on, they'll certainly be very entrenched by the time they get into high school. We find that it's a great predictor of whether they're going to be successful in high school if they have good attendance. And I think I mentioned earlier that we find that when we see kids that are having attendance issues in high school, it didn't start in high school typically. And I'm talking chronic. You know, anyone could have an issue arise in their high school career that'll keep them out of school for a while. But what we find is those chronic attendance problems are something that's been going on for a while.
Mm-hmm. And you know, it's something I think that we talked about prior to break is, and you just touched on it, forming those habits when the child is younger, you know, trying to help with that so that by the time they get to your level there at the high school, you don't have that issue.
Right.
So now you do experience quite a tardiness there at Douglas Byrd High School.
Yes, we do.
Okay. And are there any measures, anything that you all are doing at this time, Dan, to try to curb that?
One of the major initiatives that we have in place is part of our positive behavior intervention and support system. Early on, a group of teachers, myself, administrators, set 5 big goals. And one of those goals was to help curb tardiness. So what we do is we use what we call bird bucks, B-Y-R-D, bird bucks.
Bird bucks.
As an incentive. So each month we have a plan. We look to businesses for donations to see those types of things that really motivate kids. Walmart gift cards, iTunes cards, gift certificates to local restaurants. And then what happens is as the students meet those goals, whether in this particular case for tardies, before that month is over, staff members issue bird bucks to those kids, and and those bird bucks with their names on the back get dropped into a box, well, several boxes we have placed throughout the school, and then at the end of the month, the PBIS committee draws names from those boxes, and the kids receive those incentives as their name gets drawn from the box. So we really try to push that on a daily basis. One of the other things we do is the Student Government Association of Douglas Byrd High School plays an important role in what we call a Delta check.
Okay.
Because the Delta, we set 5 goals: dress, electronics, appropriate language, the L for language, the T for tardiness, and attendance. So every morning we do morning announcements led by our Student Government Leadership Executive Board, which consists of all students.
Okay.
And they remind everybody to get themselves, we call it a Delta check, to get themselves in check, and reminding them that part of that check is that you get to that class on time before that bell rings.
And so even with that, you know, how we talked with the lower grades, you see that the parent bears quite a bit of responsibility in getting that child to school on time. But then when they get to your level, Dan, a lot of that responsibility is on them.
Right, so we address it directly with the students first and foremost. If we feel like we can capture a lot of them if we talk directly to the student. When it becomes a chronic issue, of course, we start to talk about suspension, which I think you mentioned a little bit earlier, comes into that suspension, and that's when the parents get involved in it. And that's when we discuss with them the importance of tardiness, because we want them to realize that we have 4 periods on our block schedule. So when a student comes into class tardy, teacher may have started her lesson, the door opens, student may come in, whether it's an excused tardy or an unexcused tardy, automatically, and Mr. Culbreth can tell you this, and I'm sure you can too, having been in schools, where does that attention turn?
Oh yeah, to the student, and
And then off-task behavior, that teacher has to sort of regroup and recapture those students for whatever that objective or goal is for the lesson for that day. So those are the kinds of things that our administrative team has to talk to the parents about when it becomes a chronic issue, when we can't reach them through our Delta check or through our incentives at school when the tardies continue. Then those are the things we talk about with the parents, with the hopes that we would not have to end up suspending students and missing class time.
Now, let me ask you this, Dan, and Mark can answer as well. How does tardiness play into student credit, like the credits that they receive?
Mark?
Well, in North Carolina, students are required to be in 90% of the classes. And so we typically think of that in terms of days of attendance. But also, if a child's missed an hour of a 90-minute class, then we're looking at time, you know, that's going to affect their success as well. Now, schools go through a lot of different things to try to help them make up that time, create portfolios, and a lot of extra work to help these children. But when you're tardy 30, 40 times in a semester, it's just hard to recover. And it's hard for those children to even make up all that work. And in high school, it counts. You know, once you get to high school, attendance is actually part of the credit. If you don't make the time, we're really not supposed to give you credit for that course, even though we try in every way we can.
Yeah, one of the things that we're doing with tardies, when they start to hit between that 6th and 10th tardy, we start to get the attention of the parent through the social worker and what we call a PBIS crisis team or a student services team, where we'll call them in and we'll put them on a contract. So we need to see some marked improvement, and if we don't, that's when things like work portfolios and extra time comes into play, so we can make up that time, because the students need to be there based on the policy 90% of the time and engaged in the work, with ultimately it being in the hands of the teacher and myself as the principal.
Okay, now I understand that there is an initiative there in the Douglas Byrd attendance area, like a pilot program working with tardiness. Explain to us that particular program.
Chronic tardies are going to be addressed this year in the Douglas Byrd District under a pilot program where the Cumberland County Schools Central Services has agreed and has already hired a social worker to come into play to help us deal with those chronic tardies. And to put some extra teeth into it, they partners with the Fayetteville City Police Department and hired a police officer to go with that social worker to make visits to those houses to say, hey, it's important, we need you here on time, let's get going, let's get to school. And as I understand it, on some of these visits, the superintendent himself, Dr. Till, will be knocking on those doors with those folks, telling them to come to school on time and get there on time. And I look at it like this. We just had this conversation this week with our teachers. If the message we send is that it's important to us, it's going to become important to the kids and to their parents.
Right.
And we're going to see a marked improvement. I feel confident in that.
And I was about to just ask you, what are your thoughts about that? You know,
I'm excited about it. It's like I said, we fight that battle of tardiness, and we try a whole lot of things. PBIS being our biggest effort in using our student government to send that message. This is just going to be an extra added piece with a lot of teeth in it, especially when you're talking about an adult social worker coming to say, hey, look, it's important to get to school on time. And if they have a Fayetteville City police officer with them to say, hey, look, it's important to get to school on time, they're hearing it a whole lot. They're hearing it 2 and 3 times per day at school when they're there, and then if they're not, they're getting to hear it from a social worker, a police officer, and possibly the superintendent, which is an outstanding initiative.
and if it becomes chronic where the person's just constantly, have measures been put in place to address that?
The chronic tardies are going to be the ones that get the visit from the police officer and the social worker, and we're going to get them out there. And hopefully and if that doesn't work, hopefully we can get together with our crisis team. I don't know how other schools do it, but with our PBIS,
Okay,
we have what we call a portion of that PBIS team is the PBIS crisis team, which addresses the most serious issues that we have, and tardiness being one of them. There are some other things as far as academically, if students become at risk, attendance, or whatever it may be. But in this particular case with tardies, they hear it there, but those are going to be the big ones
Okay.
to try to get their attention.
Well, you know what, gentlemen, I'm looking at the clock on the wall, and I see our time is like almost up. Can you believe it's gone quickly, hasn't it?
It has.
It sure has.
But you know what, I want you to, let's spend this last little bit of time just sharing a basic, because like I said, we're trying to team up with parents to make sure that our young people are where they need to be, which is in the classroom getting instruction. Any last words?
If I could send one message, it's going to be the message that the Cumberland County Schools are using this year, that every minute counts. I ask the parents to do whatever they can. The young people, our young adolescents, our young adults in many cases, get to school on time, get there, get the instruction, because it's going to affect the graduation in the end. You don't want to put yourself into a scenario where you have to do credit recovery, where you have to stay after school between 3:30 and 5:30, or I have to have you out there during the month of July, between 8 and 1. Let's get it done while we're there. You get there on time, and if you can, and the message is this, and this is one of the things that the teacher said, if you get here and you get here on time, we feel very confident that we're going to give you what you need to graduate and become a very successful member of society.
All right. Anything real quickly, Mark?
I'm excited about all the different things we're doing, because we're trying to be positive. We're trying to work with our families, and I think Dr. Till and the Cumberland County leadership are looking for every avenue to help motivate our children and our parents.
All right. Well, Mark, Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Glad
for
to be
having
here.
us.
We'll have
Glad
you
to
back.
be here.
All right. Okay, well, on behalf of the Cumberland County School System, we want to thank you for tuning in to this show and for giving us a chance to help you get connected. Until next time.